Coming up on this week's show, the authors from the Hockey Allies Bachelor Bid Romances are here with all the details on these new books.
This is the Big Gay Fiction Podcast, the show for avid readers and passionate fans of gay romance fiction. Each week, we bring you exclusive author interviews, book recommendations, and explore the latest in gay pop culture.
Welcome to episode 234 of the Big Gay Fiction Podcast. I'm Will from willknaus.com, and with me, as always, is my co-host and husband, Mr. Jeff Adams.
Hello, everybody.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you in part by our remarkable community on Patreon. We'll have more information on how you can join them at the end of the show, along with a sneak peek of what we have coming up for you next week. Welcome back, everyone. Another week, another show. We are so glad that you could join us and that you've taken the time out of your busy at-home lives to listen to us recommend some books. We're not really going to give you any advice because we ourselves are still trying to figure out what living in these times actually means and how it's going to affect our jobs and our productivity going forward. We're still figuring that out, probably like the rest of you. So we'll see. I guess we'll just see how it goes, right?
We're all in it together.
Just a quick reminder, the first edition of the Big Gay Fiction Book Club, that episode is going to drop Tuesday, March 31st. And the book that we're going to be talking about is Annabeth Albert's Arctic Heat.
Yes, we will be talking about that fabulous book starting, well, tomorrow. If you happen to be listening to this on Monday, look for that in your podcast feed.
We do want to take a moment to note the passing of playwright Terrence McNally. Last year, we talked about a documentary about him. It's called Terrence McNally, Every Act of Life. It originally appeared on PBS as part of the American Masters series. We loved it then. We recently went back and looked at it one more time. Terrence passed away this past week from complications of COVID-19. And if you haven't taken a look at that documentary, we highly recommend it. Terrence was remarkable, and he had an amazing career that spanned several decades. The things he wrote and the work he did and the people he did it with really kind of encompass everything that the modern American theater is all about. And I think that's something that you kind of get a really interesting behind-the-scenes look at. There are, oh my God, dozens of Broadway luminaries who do interviews about their experiences working on the many, many shows that Terrence wrote. It's a really remarkable documentary. Highly recommend everyone check it out.
It's interesting to me to realize how far-reaching his work was. He wrote a lot of plays about the gay experience, things like Love, Valor, Compassion, Mothers and Sons, but also plays that really highlight the human experience, like Ragtime. And from a creative standpoint, too, it resonated with me in this particular viewing of the documentary that he didn't feel that he was a playwright until Mothers and Sons hit Broadway in 2014, and this was after he'd had several plays that were wildly successful. Yes, he had his failures too, but just a really remarkable career. Very pleased that we have seen so many of his works. Something else to point out too that connects and could be a timely viewing. We've talked on this show a couple times already this winter about the CW show Katie Keene, and just 2 weeks ago, they had an episode where Jorge, who plays the drag queen and one of Katie's friends, was working on an entire performance piece around Kiss of the Spider Woman. And several songs from that score showed up wonderfully in that episode. So we'll put that in the show notes as well, alongside Terrence McNally, Every Act of Life, which we highly recommend you can check out on Amazon Prime.
Hi, I'm Jay from the LGBTQ romance review blog Joyfully Jay. At Joyfully Jay, we review tons of LGBTQ romance, as well as romantic fiction and nonfiction. We review ebooks, audiobooks, and even the occasional movie. We typically review about 18 books a week, so Joyfully Jay is a great place to hear about new releases, catch up on books you may have missed, and find some new favorites. In addition to our reviews, each weekday we host an author as our first post of the day. This gives readers a chance to learn more about new releases, get exclusive excerpts, find out about the author, and participate in great giveaways. Each author post on Joyfully Jay is exclusive, so you get access to book and author information you can't find other places. At Joyfully Jay, we love LGBTQ romance and are excited to share it with you. Stop by the blog at joyfullyj.com. You can also visit us on our Facebook group, The Joyful Jays. We'd love to have you join us.
The book I want to talk about this week is called Someday, Someday by Emma Scott. Now, Emma's a new to me author, and I'm so very glad that I made this discovery because Someday, Someday is a beautifully complicated book about overcoming your past, keeping important people close, and embracing who you're supposed to be. Max and Silas, who are the heart and soul of the story, come from very different backgrounds, but they are equally broken. Max Kaufman was thrown out of his house at an early age and lived on the streets doing what he could to survive. He battles addiction, but he has pulled himself up, went through nursing school, and currently has a job in a hospital. But he wants out of that heartbreaking job, and he finds the right opportunity to become a private nurse to a millionaire client who has multiple sclerosis. Now, despite being the son of a millionaire, Silas March's life hasn't been easy either. His father longs for the perfect son. Silas's brother Eddie wasn't that because of Asperger's syndrome. But when Silas disappointed him because he was gay, Dad sent him away to be fixed in the Alaska wilderness. With the MS diagnosis, it's time for Silas to take over the family pharmaceutical company, but first his dad wants him to be engaged to prove that he's fit to take over. Silas is set to go through with this ruse and even has a woman willing to go along for the ride in his best friend Faith. He doesn't expect the handsome man he met at a recovery meeting to end up working as one of his father's nurses, though. Initially, he wants Max fired because he feels like Max is way too close to him since they ran into each other initially at that recovery meeting. But as Max settles in, these two go from enemies to something of a loose kind of truce before they finally move into the friends and ultimately lovers category. Max and Silas really captured my heart. They've been through so much, and neither believes that they're much suited for a relationship because of all the baggage. The only thing either has much confidence in is doing their jobs. Now, watching these two soften up towards each other brought on so many feels. While they've both had it hard, I really felt for Silas slightly more because he needs his father's approval to take over the company, which he absolutely believes should stay in the family. As he prepares to assume that lead role, he discovers that the company has been pushing opioids in a very illegal and immoral way, and he's determined to put a stop to that and right the company's wrongs at all costs. Now, Max has his own set of issues, too. He's really trying to repair his relationship at home. While he and his sister have a strong relationship, he's working on patching things up with his mom and hoping, perhaps beyond hope, that he can do the same with his father. And he's not sure where a boyfriend fits into all that. Not to mention that he's still in recovery for his addictions, too, and that he probably really shouldn't be dating the boss's son. It's Silas's older brother, Eddie, who really helps bring the couple together. Now, Eddie misses nothing, and he isn't afraid to call people out either. Silas is more himself around his brother than anyone else as he plays piano for him and makes sure that he gets taken care of properly. And it's really the moments where Max and Silas are around Eddie where the bridge starts to build between these two men. As they spend more time together, though, it becomes obvious to them that they have a spark and that they're really drawn for each other and in many ways truly good for each other. But as outsiders kind of start to figure out what's happening, that freaks Silas out because he really doesn't think he can have this surface. Everything comes to a head at the March Halloween party, and it's some of the most spectacular fireworks that I've seen on a page that, again, though, left me with all the feels. The way that these two managed to bring themselves together and finally stand up for what they want out of life just made this truly one of the best books that I've read over the past few months. And I've read some really good ones, so that's saying a lot. I really love how Emma blended together these two men with some very deep wounds, both caused by family, and added the great characters of Eddie and Faith to give even more dimension to the story. These guys fight for themselves and ultimately fight the good fight for each other, and I absolutely loved it. I recommend Someday, Someday by Emma Scott, and I'm very much looking forward to talking to Emma about this book when she's going to come on the show later this spring.
Now, if you're interested in learning more about books or anything else that we've discussed on this week's show, all you have to do is go to the show notes page for episode 234 at biggayfictionpodcast.com.
Did you know that podcasts love to get reviews too? Taking a moment to leave a review about the Big Gay Fiction Podcast helps us with the show's visibility online. please take a moment to visit iTunes and leave a review. Your comments help other readers of gay romance discover this show. Thanks for helping us spread the word about the Big Gay Fiction Podcast.
So I am super excited this week to welcome my co-authors of the Hockey Allies Bachelor Bid Romances, which actually go on pre-order this week. I am going to welcome RJ Scott, VL Locey, Susan Scott Shelley, and Chantal Marr, and we're going to talk all about these new hockey romances. I am so excited to welcome the co-authors who worked with me on the Hockey Allies Bachelor Bid series. We've got RJ, Vicky, Susan, and Chantal here. Hello, everybody.
Hi. Hi.
So I want to have everybody introduce themselves. Vicky and RJ are return guests here, but we're going to have them do that too. But we're going to start with our newbies of Susan and Chantal. So Susan, we'll start with you.
Okay, well, hi everybody. I'm Susan Scott Shelley. I live in Philly. I'm a big hockey fan, and I've been writing for, I guess, about the past 10 years. And I do a lot of sports.
Sports are good. So Philly, are you a Flyers person or?
I definitely grew up as a Flyers fan, but I also followed what eventually ended up being the Colorado Avalanche when a bunch of the Flyers left in the Lindros trade. So I follow mainly the Avalanche and the Flyers right now, although every so often I pick up another team because I have the NHL package, so I watch like a lot. But yeah, I definitely probably first and foremost Flyers, and then everybody else.
All right,
so,
good
yeah.
deal. Chantal.
Hi, I'm Chantal Mayer, and I just released my first book in November, so I'm new to the whole writing thing. I know. Oh my gosh.
A baby.
A baby writer, not a baby in age. So I've had so much fun writing this book and just being involved with you all. It's been a blast. And I live outside of Philadelphia, so I'm fairly close to Susan.
We're critique partners.
We are critique partners, yes.
Fantastic. Also Flyers for you, or do you have other allegiances?
Well, I really, my allegiance really is with Gritty. I mean, where he goes, there I shall go also.
Best mascot ever.
I mean, really, what else is there?
All right, Vicky, who I already know is a Rangers fan.
Everybody knows that. Like, the first thing people say, that broad that likes the Rangers. Yeah, I know her. I'm Vicky Locey. I write under the super secret pen name of VL Locey. I've been writing hockey romances for about 8 years now. And then 2 or 3 years ago, I guess RJ and I started writing. Has it been that long?
I think it's been about 3 years. Yeah, 3 years this summer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that went fast. So we co-author, we're on our 3rd hockey romance series now. And yeah, I'm a Rangers fan. I live in Pennsylvania, but way up at the border where I border along New York. So that's why I say I follow the Rangers.
Excellent. And RJ.
Hi, everybody. I'm RJ. I live about 40 miles northwest of London in England, if you can't tell by the accent. I am a Penguins fan.
Woohoo!
Even though Chantal and Susan are Flyers fans, they're okay people. I don't really have a second team. I follow bits and pieces of the Rangers because with Vicky as a bestie, you can't really not, because you get to hear it all. And obviously, I was hugging her very gently when her man left.
Mats!
We can't talk about Mats. And obviously, when Flower went off to Vegas, I was heartbroken. So, yeah, I keep my eye on him as well.
I followed the Knights for the same reason, because I was devastated when he left.
Oh, devastated, yeah. This year, it's my 10-year anniversary of writing.
Congratulations.
Yay, thank you. Big celebration soon. And I've been writing hockey romance for about 4 years. The last 3 years with Vicky. The last book we wrote in 3 weeks, flat, maybe less.
Wow.
Literally, it just fell out of us. And it's possibly the best thing we've written together, I think. And as we record this on the Saturday, the release is tomorrow. So it's quite exciting.
Oh, wow. Great.
Yeah.
What's the name of it? Tell us the name.
Shadow and Light.
Excellent.
I love that title.
That's a good title, yeah.
Shadow and Light. But the best one we've got is book 4, which is Sugar and Ice.
Ooh.
How cool is that? But this is our third hockey series that we've written together, as Vicky said, and it's been a lot of fun. I mean, I've had to put up with Vicky, but other than that, it's been great.
After 3 years, you probably know how to do that, though. So.
Yeah.
She just tones me out completely now.
So all projects have their origin story, and the origin of Hockey Allies Bachelor Bid lies with Susan.
Yes.
Tell us how this came about and how you went about finding everybody to play in this world with you.
Sure. So I found an article on Outsports, and they were talking about the New York Gay Football League and how they were holding a bachelor auction to raise money for, I guess, something for the league. And I was thinking to myself, that right there, like, that's totally a romance novel, right? Like, I could just see all these, like, sports guys coming together for a bachelor auction. And I'm like, well, obviously, hockey is my first love. Like, I like football too, but like hockey's like my thing. And I love RJ and Vicky, and I loved the Railer series. And I was like, I have to immediately talk to RJ and Vicky. And that's how it kind of started.
And RJ and Vicky, what did you guys think of the idea of the bachelor auction as the tie together?
Oh, I think it's a brilliant idea. I just think it's so cool.
Yeah, we were like totally in. The first time Susan mentioned it, we're like, oh yeah, we're there.
I just thought it could be like everyone's series all coming together, and like, I guess like I'm a fan anyway of theirs, and like I love them, and just like I wanted, my Buffalo team to have other people to play with. So.
I think when I was growing up, I very much loved, that kind of old Mills and Boone type stories where there was some kind of auction, and that the rich guy got the girl, or the girl got the rich guy, or whichever way around it is. And I just loved the thought of these. I mean, we have got some really good looking hockey players out there in real life. So it was very easy to get inspiration.
Yeah. And I also liked how like this idea, it grew, and it's encompassing the whole LGBT community and hockey. And I really liked that idea a lot, and that, we bring the LGBTQ community together for this bachelor auction, and all of our individual players are involved. And it was just a really, really good idea.
Yeah,
that took weight immediately.
Inspirational.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because Hockey Allies in the series is an organization that we kind of modeled after You Can Play, which, of course, is an organization that seeks to fight for equality and respect and good sportsmanship across the board, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity. So it all fed in really well together.
Yeah, it did. And also because the hockey world in itself, if you're a fan long enough, you come to understand that most of these guys know each other. I mean, they've billeted together, or they've played in college, or they've been on this team, that team, this team. So it's just it fits that they would all at least know each other and be like, oh yeah, hey, hi there, I remember you from when we were playing back in junior, and so it's just everything just melded really well.
Yeah.
Chantal, how did you come to the group? Because as you noted, you're the newbie here. What was your entry?
Well, Susan and I usually meet monthly, have lunch, and we do plotting and, critiquing. And so she was telling me about this idea, and she said, you should write something. And I was a little leery because, again, I'm a newbie. But as usual, Susan was encouraging. And so I was like, okay. And my guys just kind of appeared, and so we have a story. So it was Susan's fault. So it's all Susan's fault.
I take full responsibility. Chantal is an amazing writer, and I've been in love with one of her minor characters from her book that she released in November. And I kept saying, he needs a story. And eventually I know she's going to do the story because I will badger her until it happens. But
I started his story.
She was planning on doing LGBT stories, and I was thinking like, well, this is a great way to get in. Like, this is a great group of people, and I just really wanted to be in a project with her, and it all just came together, and her story is amazing. I got to read it first, and I'm very happy. It's so good.
That's really good. I'm really, really impressed. Yeah.
Very, very good. Yes.
Thank you.
I'm the odd man out. I haven't read it yet because I've been trying to finish my own. I got to get on that.
There's always one that lets
I
us
still love
slide.
Susan mentioned you were going to write an MM story. Your first book was MF.
Yes.
How was it kind of getting into the MM romance as a writer, and had you been reading it before that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I read everything, so yeah, I've always read it. I didn't find it. I guess my prologue, that was my biggest concern, because I had to have them. Someone says something really mean, and I didn't want to be too mean, but I needed it to be. I needed it to be bad, so that was my big concern. And then the sex scenes, those are always my concerns, whether it's MF or MM. So
Agreed.
I think the thing with this story is it was the first time I wrote in first person. And I don't know why I wrote it in first person. That's just how it came out. So that was different for me.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, for some reason I started in third, and I'm like, this is so wrong. So by chapter 5, I was back in first.
Yeah, you know, don't you? Like well, I always write in first, but like, yeah, you know, when it's not working quickly.
Yeah.
I'd never written in first until I met Vicky, and we decided to start writing Tennant and Jared's story and changing lines. And it was like, first person, no, I can't. I'm not sure I could do that. I think it just wasn't me. And then literally the first chapter I wrote, I was hooked. And quite a few of my books now are in first person, because it just feels like I can get inside their head more. So
yeah, I think because I wrote their trauma scenes, which are only for me, I wrote them in first person, and so I think I guess that's why then I felt like I had to write them in first person. I don't know but again, they just came out that way.
Cool.
It worked really well.
And I think I got to the project. I tried to go back in chat histories, and we've been working on this project for, I think it's almost been a year, and maybe only 9 months, but I think it was either Vicky or RJ who brought me in, because we'd worked together on Changing on the Fly 2, and it was one of you guys who said, hey, there's this thing, and I'm like, yes, please. I didn't even need to really think about it.
If it's a good thing, then it was me who suggested it.
The nice thing is we all worked so well together, because I mean, initially there was only the thread of the idea of there would be this bachelor auction, and everything would connect through there, and then everything else, you know, we had a couple of big planning sessions of who the characters were and what the auction would be like, because of course we can't all have auctions that sound different.
Right. Yeah.
What did you all think of how we planned and organized? And especially if you've done shared universes before, how did this kind of compare?
This was my first shared universe. There was the very first anthology I was in. All of our guys were on the same team, and it was a cup-winning team that was kind of put together like Vegas. But that was the only connection, and it was basically the summer after the Cup, so we didn't have to have our teammates involved at all if we didn't want to. So this was the first time that I've been in something where we actually had to know each other's players' names, and when the auction was going to be, and what the hotel looked like, and what the auction looked like, and who the MC was, and all that stuff. But I think we did pretty good with I like to see things in front of me. So having our docs with all of the information, our files, really helped, because I need plans. I need it on paper. So everybody was so good with getting all of that information together, and I think it really helped really shape the world well.
Yeah, Google Docs. Vicky and I use those a lot when we're planning for our joint books, because they're free, they're out there, and it's one place where you can see absolutely everything that forms part of the series. Yeah, I think it worked really well. I think it was really smooth. And I think Chantal mentioned before we came into the recording part that is this not how a project normally works? And we had to say to her, not always, no.
Right.
Sometimes it isn't as smooth. So fair play to us for.
I'm blaming all of you for ruining me then, because
Yeah.
it's been such a lovely experience.
Well, we're going to have to do it again then, aren't we?
Yes. Oh, I love that. Oh,
Let's dig into talking about these books a little bit. Now, we've structured them so they can each totally be read standalone if desired. But I think, between the five of us, we've always kind of had an order that we envisioned how they would go. So I'm going to go in that order as we talk about the books. And that means we kick off with RJ's Guarding Garrett.
Oh, yeah. Well, the reason I thought that mine probably should go first is because my book actually kind of ends around the auction, and the action culminates around the auction. So you've got the build-up of poor Garrett, who is this big, strong, Tyler Sagan type, Instagram lovable, gorgeous guy who doesn't take any shit from anybody, and on the ice he's like a god. Invincible, but then he gets a stalker, and that's where Jason comes in, and their relationship grows against the threats and the danger and the secrets that unfold, and it kind of comes to a head around the auction. So my book actually ends just with the auction and what happens at the auction, so it kind of makes sense that mine built up to that, and then you can go on to the next person, but they can all be read as standalones. They all happen at different times around the auction. It's not like everybody's chapter one is, here's the auction, this is how our guys met, and then the story happens. So it fits in different places.
I really like how we did that too. We didn't even really talk about that. It just kind of happened that way.
Yeah.
Very organic, wasn't it?
It was.
It's just brilliant. I just really enjoyed writing it, and I love bodyguard stories anyway, because I've got several of my series are based around bodyguards and forced proximity and love and the angry kiss. It's all my favorite tropes all rolled into one book. So it's
like her angry kisses, I can tell you that.
I do like my angry kisses, and there is one in this book, so that's a plus. That's a tick.
Kind of the other thing I like too is that we all went in kind of different tropes and subgenres too.
Yeah.
And that was organic also.
Yeah.
We had a blank canvas, didn't we? It was like, right, take two guys,
right,
and write their story, and it could be any story. It could have been anything at all. If it had been around Christmas, I'm sure we'd have all come up with different stories that involve Christmas, but it just so happens that we wanted to set this story around the now not happening Stanley Cup.
That's the thing, right? We organized our release, so the books all go on pre-order, wide release on March 31st. We do a wide release on April 7th, which should have been the beginning of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and then we go into KU on April 9th. But now we're giving everybody hockey when there's no hockey to watch.
Exactly.
So really, it's a very altruistic project.
Vicky, tell us all about Loving Lane.
Loving Lane. Well, when I first started to wrangle up an idea for this story, I'm not a plotter at all, so everything is very organic with me, but I generally will settle on the trope, and if I can do an age gap, then that's the trope I'm going with. That's my jam is an age gap. So Loving Lane is that it's an age gap, and it's also a best friend's father, which is an interesting, I've never written one of those before, and it was a very interesting dance to get it so that everything worked well in the story, and that things weren't too, even my editor at one point was like, are you sure about this? I'm like, yep, it's fine. Yeah, they'll be fine. But it's about basically a journalism major who is pulled to Chicago, where the bachelor bid takes place, by his best friend, and his best friend is sitting on this huge secret, and the secret is revealed during the bachelor bid in a very public way. So I don't want to give away a whole lot, but I probably did, saying the best friend's father. But oh well. Oh well.
Yeah, yours was the first book I read because you finished this book, I think, before most of us had even started on the rest of it.
Yeah.
She's insanely productive. Yeah.
I am.
Yeah, I
I'm
like the
very
little
monkish
kind of
about that kind of stuff.
the secret mystery kind of thing was really interesting to me, and how it all worked into the story.
Yeah, it was like I said, it was quite a little bit of a tap dance, because that trope can be kind of like it can make people go, oh, yeah, like not the age gap. Well, the age gap can too, but it's a pretty substantial age gap as well, which also is my jam. So there was a lot of fine tuning, like in editing, to make sure like my editor was happy with it, because when I wrote it, of course, I'm happy with everything I write, because everything I write is just golden.
Absolutely.
Ask RJ, she will tell you.
Absolutely, Vicky. Okay. Everything you write is wonderful.
Yes, everything. All my words are gold. But, so I wanted to make sure that getting this from an outside source, that everything worked. And my editor was very happy with it. And then, so I'm assuming it's all good. We'll find out.
It's brilliant.
It worked so well. It worked really well.
Yeah, I love
it. Good.
So third in the sequence is my book, Keeping Kyle. I kind of swung to kind of a sweet, almost category romance. So I've got like a tech entrepreneur, Austin, who has had a wild crush on Kyle since they were in the same high school together. They didn't know each other at all, but they were in the same high school, and Austin followed Kyle's career as Kyle went through college in Ann Arbor and then ended up on the Detroit Arsenal. And when he got the opportunity to go to Chicago for the All-Star game and then bid on Kyle, he was not going to lose. And the thing is, for both of these guys, they've both had different but similar childhoods. Kyle lost his father when he was 8, and he was very much told he was the man of the family, had to take care of the family, even though he was 8. And it kind of stuck with him. And he's also the subject of trade rumors, because Detroit needs some defensemen. And so he's worried about now having to leave his hometown and where he's supposed to be in his mind. Whereas Austin grew up poor. His parents worked multiple jobs. Once he was of age to start contributing to the family, he was expected to really be doing homework or making money to help keep the family afloat, but also expected to go to college and do great things. So he's built this tech company that he's unfortunately on the verge of losing. And so he's a workaholic trying to save that. And so you've got two people who really don't see time for a boyfriend and have all this other stuff going on. But then there's a little something that kind of pivots their perception of things and what their lives maybe should be.
We love a little something.
Yeah, it was so fun to write. And I have to say that RJ and I had a little fun on the side, too, because Garrett is Kyle's best friend.
In a way, audience, in a way.
RJ offered up Garrett to be Kyle's best friend. I had a lot of fun kind of brainstorming some stuff with RJ, because we made it where Garrett is Kyle's bestie from their junior days, which was ridiculously fun for me.
It was a really nice tie-in too. It was just like another neat little way of tying all these guys together, aside from the obvious things.
Absolutely. I like how, there's these little points of crisscross. So Susan, let's hear all about scoring Slater.
So Slater has been playing for Buffalo for the past 3 seasons. He got there as a rookie. He is very much attached to his phone and social media, and he posts all the time, and he's really gathered a following of fans. So he gets voted in as the last man in for his division for the All-Star game. The love interest is his best friend, Noah. Noah was traded to the team over the summer. So they're best friends. They're also roommates and obviously teammates. And Slater's kind of in love with him and doesn't really know what to say or he should say anything because Noah got out of a relationship before he got traded and kind of wasn't looking for anything. They're very much an odd couple. Slater is kind of messy. Noah is very, very neat. Everything's in order, color coordinated, like ridiculously over the top. Definitely the Felix and Oscar. So Noah is very, 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 very private. The complete opposite of Slater, posting every meal and selfie he can. Noah was outed at the draft, and that had a huge media firestorm around it. So he's been very, very closed off and shut down since then. So everything with them is kind of opposite, but he would love to have a relationship with Slater, but he doesn't really know if he's the right person. And then, of course, the auction happens, and it might make them test that. Maybe, I don't know, maybe. But I had such a good time with writing these guys. Like, I love like the best friends dynamic, and I really wanted to do something with teammates and the whole roommate situation. So this was hard for me to write for like reasons outside of writing, but at the same time, I'm really happy with the way they came together.
And I told Susan, I actually told her this last night, like, because I'm fortunate enough that I've been able to read it, and I think it's like, I mean, it has all the feels. I mean, oh, it's so good. I love it.
Yeah.
Chantal's very, very good for me. Chantal's character, Isaiah, I got to borrow him for a little bit in my book. When we were plotting it out, I'm like, I needed him. It was fun to have Isaiah pop up for me.
I have to say that Friends to Lovers is one of my favorite things ever. And then you add that teammate dynamic too, which turns it, of course, into workplace dynamics.
Yeah.
I suspect yours is going to be like crack for me because you hit some of my favorite tropes.
Oh, and then they're roommates too. So just
False
saying.
proximity.
It just piles on.
We have it.
Just saying.
These books have just about a little something for anybody, don't they?
Yeah.
Whatever your Jim Jam is, we have it for you in these books.
Yeah, for sure. So, Chantal, tell us all about Absolving Ash.
So Ash needed to be last because Ash actually retired 10 years prior. He retired from the NHL at the age of 24 after he injured Isaiah so badly that Isaiah had to leave hockey at the age of 20. And so my guys are, I mean, Ash is just he's so tormented. I love a tormented. I love torment. I love, like I said, I wrote trauma scenes. I'm always writing a trauma scene. Ash went to Chicago and he became a chef. And he's laid low. He's changed his name. He is just out of the spotlight because he feels that he can never make up for what he did to Isaiah. And then Isaiah happens to be working the Bachelor auction for the Hockey Network. He's doing kind of the fun little segments. So he's interviewing the Bachelors and getting footage and stuff. And so he's there. And Ash is catering the event. And it's when Lane, in Vicky's book, kind of pulls out of the event that they need an extra person, and Ash gets pulled in. He doesn't want to, but he does it to help his friend, who is one of the people who runs the Hockey Allies auction. This is Rivals to Lovers. It's about forgiveness, about how we can forgive ourselves, how we can forgive each other, and how these two guys find love.
It's a fabulous redemption story. It really is.
Very good.
And they have dogs. They have cute
dogs. Dogs are my favorite.
Everything's better with a puppy.
Yeah.
As each of you were writing the stories, anything in particular that kind of threw you as a curveball as you were working through your stories?
I don't actually plot any of it, so I think every single word I write is a curveball. Vicky will tell you. I mean, we go in with a chapter that I'm supposed to be writing, or she's supposed to be writing, and then it kind of changes halfway through, because I always hate using this explanation, but it's like when you learn your characters and they start to talk to you, and it takes you in a completely different direction, because you want them to do X, Y, Z, and their characters telling you that actually they want to do A, B, C. So I think my books are constantly throwing me for curveballs, if that's an answer.
Well, like just the process of being an organic writer, every time you sit down to write, you have the possibility of being thrown a curveball, because you don't know where the character is going to take you, as opposed to like people who plot out, like, I mean, some people are very serious plotters where they plot out every scene in a book. Like with RJ and I, and we just pretty much sit down and be like, so what do you want to cover in this one? We'll be like, well, we're going to cover this. Okay. And then the next day, you get the chapter back and you're like, okay, I did not see that coming. That's how it is even with my solo books, even like with this one. I mean, there were a few things in there, like I said, that required some real dancing, because I wasn't sure how to handle this situation that cropped up. So yeah, there's.
I was in literally the middle of the book. For me, the auction happens in the middle of my book. So this is the second scene after they're back. Now they're back in Buffalo. And I'm writing and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking like the scene's not working, but I don't know why. And I get up and I'm walking around and then it just comes to me, something that probably should have been obvious from the beginning looking at it now. And it didn't, something that would really, really dig in at Noah's wound. And it would be the worst possible thing in the world for him regarding Slater. And I'm like, oh, why did, so I guess it popped up late, but I'm glad it did. But
Did you have to go back and like seed the information?
I think it was kind of, that was already there. Like I went back and I added a couple of lines in, because Chantal, I'm talking for Chantal, but she comes from her social worker background and she's very much, well, what's wrong? What's the wound? And for me, I'm always like, I'm a middle child and I like to fix everything. So I like to make everything happy for everyone all the time, which is not good when you're writing a book if people are just happy all the time. So I was like, I have to be mean to him. And what would make him really uncomfortable? But the thread was already there. I just had to push it a little bit more. So, but I'm happy that popped into my head, because it definitely made the conflict stronger. So
yeah, it definitely works. I think for me, one of the things I found surprising is that I actually plotted. I've not really plotted as much as I plotted this book with Susan, and I found that it was really a lot easier to write. So that was actually surprising to me. Susan and I sat down one day and I knew, what beats I was going to hit. I didn't necessarily know how I was going to get there, but I knew I needed to get there. And so that actually surprised me, is how much easier it was for me to write that way.
Kind of surprises in Kyle. These days I plot, like the last couple years of books, I've plotted pretty heavily, but in plotting Kyle, the fourth act was kind of a black hole for me. I kind of, obviously I knew I was headed towards a happily ever after, but I kind of didn't know what the dark everything falls apart moment was or how they fixed it. At the time of writing, I was in a online class that Rachel Herron teaches called 90 Days to Done. And the class actually helped me figure out that fourth act, because in the class everybody has a moment where they present something, whether it's just here's what my story is or here's where I need help or whatever. And so that class, plus working with Will, my husband, figured out that fourth act. And it was like, thank God, because there has to be something that happens here. But I was surprised at how much trouble I had coming up with the fourth act. I think I didn't want to break these guys to the point of what had to happen in the fourth act, because while you can't have them happy all the time, I like these guys so much I didn't want to break them either.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to hurt all of my characters. Some of them, I think, if I hurt some of my characters, I think some of my readers might hunt me down and kill me. Look what we did. Well, it was all Vicky's fault, but we we hurt one of our hockey players in our first series of books, but we've rebuilt that hockey player through our other books. But it had to happen. That dark moment had to happen, and it affected all the people around them. And I think the dark moment actually shows people what kind of character they've got and how it can change them. So I think yours worked really well.
What do you think it is that makes hockey romance consistently seems to do so well?
For me, like the one thing that I've always with hockey players more so than any other sport, they always seem to be more affectionate with each other, because they've played together for years, most of the time, either growing up, juniors, whatever. And you see them, they'll hug, there's a picture of Tyler Sagan at an airport, laying on one of their guys sleeping. You'll see just I feel like as much as there's still some homophobia, I feel like there's just more affection. I like seeing that, and that they're not afraid to show that. So I think that's one of the reasons I really enjoy reading hockey romances. It makes sense to me that, I don't know, it's just kind of
Yeah, I think you're making perfect sense. I mean, if you look at a normal hockey season is 80 games before playoffs. And if you're on that team, you are spending 7-8 months with the other people. I mean, it's not like football where you get together. I mean, they have scrimmages, of course, but it's once a week, as opposed to hockey is 3-4 games a week. So you're with these people. This is your family essentially for 8 months.
Yeah.
So I mean, of course they're going to be they're going to be as close as brothers. And there's also just something about hockey players, and I'm not saying this to offend any other athletes, but hockey players seem to have a greater sense of team. If you listen to the interviews, there is never I. It's always we. We need to play tight in the corners. We need to score. There's never I. There's just something about that how humble hockey players are that really appeals to me.
And I think that starts from a young age, because if you look at, I mean, where I live, hockey is so big, with kids. And I mean, even at age 4, kids are out there. I mean, it's insane. But there's just there is this community, this camaraderie that begins at such a young age. And I think that you see that throughout their careers.
All right. As we wrap up, it'll be good to hear from everybody kind of what's coming up next and what your website is so that people can follow along to make sure that they keep up with your book. So, Chantal, tell us what you've got coming up after this Hockey Allies book.
So I have the second book in my friendship series, which is male-female, coming up, and that is Running from Friendship. So hopefully that will get out sometime in April, May, something like that. And then I hope to write a story about Leon, who is the character that Susan touched base on, who's in my first book, Returning from Friendship, and that will be a male. I hope to get his story out because I love him. He's such a fun character. My books and newsletter and everything can be found on my website, chantalmaire.com.
Fantastic. And Susan, what's headed up next from you?
So the next thing I have coming up is the book 2 in my Bliss Bakery series. It's currently titled Falling Sweetly, but that title may change. That is male, just like book 1, which was Sugar Crush. So that should be out, I'm hoping, for June/July. And then after that will be the third book in my football series, which is male-female, although that series is mixed MF and MM, just like my hockey Buffalo series is. So I've been needing to get back to football, so hopefully that book will come out in time for football season. And all of my books and everything else about me are on my website, susanscottshelley.com.
All right, Vicki, what's coming up next for you?
Oh, my goodness. Well, as my effervescent co-author mentioned earlier, we have Shadow and Light. That will be available when this comes out. And then, of course, Loving Lane. And I guess looking in May, I have Final Shot coming out, which is the second book in my Overtime trilogy. And this is Dan Aru Kalinsky's story. which I was very excited about because I've written about 1,800 books about Victor Kalinsky, who's very pushy, and I'm surprised he even let me write about Dan, to be honest. But he has, so that one's going to be coming out in May, and we'll just stop at May. I have stuff coming out all, but we'll just go with that. On my website, you can find my books, my publishing calendar, blog. I have a serial that's running. All of that can be found on vllocey.com.
Excellent. And RJ.
Okay, well, Guarding Garrett is coming out in early April. We've got Shadow and Light, which will be out by the time this is played. So that was with Vicky. And the next one we'll be writing in that is Sugar and Ice, which is coming out in July. I'm wrapping up my Lancaster Falls romantic suspense series with book 3, All That Remains, which will be out in June. And then I'm switching back to my single dads for book 4, Always, which will be out kind of late July, early August. And if I get any time to sleep, I will try and catch up on some sleep. My website is rjscott.co.uk. There's lots of freebies on there and news and my blog and interviews and visiting guests and all kinds of shenanigans that happen on that website.
All right. Fantastic. We will link to everything we talked about in the show notes so that people can find that stuff quite easily. It's been so good talking to all of you and getting us back together to talk about the Hockey Allies series as it comes out to the world.
Yes, thank you. This has been so much fun.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
This week's interview transcript has been brought to you by our community on Patreon. If you'd like to read the interview for yourself, simply head on over to the show notes page for this episode at biggayfictionpodcast.com.
And thanks again to RJ, Vicky, Susan, and Chantal for coming over and talking to us about these new hockey romances. As you heard in the interview, pre-orders start this week, and the books will be releasing wide on April 7th and going into Kindle Unlimited on April 9th.
All right, I think that's going to do it for this week's show. Now, coming up next week in episode 235, we don't know. It's mainly just going to be Jeff and myself talking about stuff we like. Most likely, it's going to be about books and movies.
I would say that is probably pretty accurate. So
it's a safe bet.
Next week, a special mystery episode, and we hope you will join us for that.
Remember, no matter where life takes you, the journey will always be sweeter when you have a book. Until next time, everyone, please keep turning those pages and keep reading.
Big Gay Fiction Podcast is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. You can find more shows you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts. New episodes of this show are available every Monday wherever you get your podcasts. You can help support this show with a monthly pledge through Patreon. For more information about joining our community and the bonus content we deliver, check out patreon.com/biggayfictionpodcast. I'm Kurt Graves. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.